This is CityCast Seattle. I'm Jane C. Hu, and here's what Seattle's talking about. With the Seattle Torrent's team captain Hilary Knight being traded away, how is the women's hockey team's second season looking? And thanks, climate change, for making Seattle the third worst city for grass pollen. We'll get into that and the week's headlines in our midweek medley. But first, is there a Pacific Northwest accent? So this all came about because our audience development manager, Ben Keenan, has been getting crap for his pronunciation of bagel. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Jane.
Say bagel real quick for us, just so we have an example here.
I have to think. I hear how you say it, so I'm trying to take myself out of the moment. Bagel.
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 Okay.
Bagel.
So to talk about the Pacific Northwest accent, we have with us Kara Becker, a professor of linguistics at Reed College, who can apply some actual facts to our conversation here. Welcome to the show, Kara.
Thanks for having me.
So what defines a Pacific Northwest accent?
That's a good question. It's an interesting topic because a lot of people that live here in the Pacific Northwest would likely report that they don't think that they have an accent. I grew up on the East Coast and did a lot of research in New York City, for example, and the average person there definitely thinks they have an accent. They can even describe it and talk about it. And so in a lot of places, people have this awareness of accents and some kind of information about the fact that the way that they talk marks them as being from a particular place and is different from people in other places. Now, the reality is every person who speaks a language has an accent, right? It's a funny thing, actually. If I ask a group of students, raise your hand if you don't think you have an accent. And here in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of people will raise their hand. And that's funny to me as a linguist, right? Because again, we all have an accent. But the reality is here in the Pacific Northwest, there's a couple things going on. So first, there are fewer features that are noticeable and noticeably different than the way those things are done in other places, right?
Gotcha.
So it's maybe a little bit more subtle, but I would say there's also something going on that's ideological. So a belief that the way that English is spoken here is quote unquote normal or standard, right? And we're not the only place where people kind of have a belief that there is no accent. And it actually kind of changes location and changes over time. So I don't know about you, but when my parents grew up, they would say that people didn't have accents who were from the quote unquote Midwest. And they would say that's where broadcasters were hired from because they had no accents. And actually, I think that ideology has shifted a little bit towards the West, where there are places like the Pacific Northwest where a lot of people just kind of have this idea oh, no, I don't have an accent. Again, that's not actually a thing, but it's a really interesting phenomenon. And I think it's really common here.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Okay, so speaking of teasing, I think Ben has gotten a fair amount of teasing about bagel. Are there examples of words that exemplify the Pacific Northwest accent, like the differences between our accent and other dominant accents in the U.S.?
So the fact that Ben's being teased about that particular word makes a lot of sense, because I would say that's probably the most noticeable feature of Pacific Northwest English. It's not specific to Pacific Northwest English, so it's the pronunciation of a few vowels before specifically the G sound. And so there's 3 vowels pronounced before G. And what is happening is they're actually kind of all collapsing together so that they all sound the same. So we have the A sound before G, so that's the word bagel. We have the E sound before G, so that would be in a word like egg or keg. And then we have the A sound before G, and that's a word like bag. And when I've interviewed folks from the Pacific Northwest, they will bring up these words as examples of, so first they'll say, I didn't ever think I had an accent, and I actually still really don't. But if I leave the Pacific Northwest, people will point out my pronunciation of bag or bagel. And actually what's happening is the vowels in those words are actually collapsing together. So bag, the tongue moves up a little bit. So it's going to sound a little bit more like bag, right? You might carry a bag or tote bag. And then bagel is a little bit higher. And actually, when Ben produces it and some folks from the PNW, it drops down a little bit. So we call that a merger. So the vowels before G in these cases are kind of collapsing together into a single pronunciation.
Ben, say bag.
The way I
Bag.
did this before, I described it as going to get a bag of bagels. And everyone's like, you literally switched them around, which in my brain, I'm like, okay, that's just, I can understand like what I received a lot of feedback on is I'm pronouncing it Begle, bagel. And what I should be pronouncing it as is Baygul, like bagel. And so if I slow down and say the word as it is technically supposed to be like phonetically written out, I can see the difference. But when I just say the word like bagel, and then I'm like, I can see bagel. I'm like, that sounds the same to me. And so when I hit bag and a bag, I'm like, I think those are the same word. I don't know.
So you just demonstrated this merger that I'm talking about is really helpful to say a bag of bagels. And for you, they're the same. I have a couple comments. So first, I don't believe as a linguist there's any way that you should pronounce anything, but I do understand that you're going to get that feedback, right? And the other thing I want to say is that you'd also just demonstrated a really interesting principle, which is that we often have a difference between our perception, so what we can hear and understand about sounds, and our production and what we say. So what you're reporting is like there are times where you kind of can't tell the difference, right? They sort of sound the same to you, these vowels before G. But if you pay attention and you slow down and someone points it out to you, you can produce that difference. And so that's actually a really common thing. And when a merger happens, which is what I'm talking about, where these vowels sound the same in this specific context right before the G sound, often a merger is more advanced in our perception or what we hear than in our production or what we say. So you just kind of demonstrated all those things.
So I'm wondering also if bagel is maybe a particularly good example of this, because I feel like bagels are traditionally more of an East Coast thing than a West Coast thing. And so maybe that pronunciation, the vowel there got hardened and people have stronger feelings about how it, quote, should be pronounced based on the East Coast pronunciation versus the West Coast pronunciation. I don't know.
It's possible, I think you're right, that people have a lot of opinions about bagels in general. And so there are examples where a word is going to be more salient, and it could be because it has some cultural significance. It could also be because a word is like higher frequency, so it's just we come across it a lot more. So bag is a good example of that. A lot of people will tell me, you know, they get teased for how they pronounce the word bag. And likely that's because they're actually saying the word bag a good amount. And it could be true for bagels too, I guess, if you eat a lot of bagels versus, you know, some other examples of the same phenomenon in a like a less salient or a less frequent word.
So we've been talking about the Pacific Northwest accent as, you know, of course, one of many accents, because everyone always has an accent of some kind. I think one big piece of conversation that's happening in the Northwest right now is the number of transplants that are coming to the area. Like our demographics are changing pretty quickly. Is there any evidence so far that the Pacific Northwest accent could be changing or shifting as well in reaction to these new accents kind of coming together in this melting pot?
That's a great question. The answer is a little complicated. So the first thing I want to say is that in general, we are less influenced by these kind of things coming in to our dialect area than we are by the time and the way that we acquired our accent, which happens during childhood. So I'm from New Jersey, but my parents are from Chicago. Well, when I'm very young and I just hang out with my parents at home, I actually start to acquire their system. So maybe a little Chicago when I'm 2, but very quickly, once we go to school around 5, we very quickly orient to our peers. And so that's how regional accents come about. It's because we pay a lot of attention to the people we talk to face during this whole period of childhood and into adolescence. That's when we kind of set our accent. So that's the main thing that I want to say. And sometimes that's surprising to people because they think like, oh, there's got to be, you know, a greater influence of other things. So one thing that people talk about a lot is the major change to sort of online interactions, right? We have the ability to talk to or hear or take in input from all across the world. That wasn't the case a long time ago. And so one thing I would just say in general about accents in the US that's interesting is that a lot of young people in dialect regions all across the US, the young people in these places are actually sounding less like their parents and grandparents. So they're actually pulling back on these regional accents. And that's happening in a lot of places. And actually, with respect to our vowels, a lot of young people are kind of coalescing around a very similar pattern. And that's true here in the Pacific Northwest as well. So a young person in the Pacific Northwest sounds very similar to a young person in California, sounds very similar to a young person in Kansas, and all across the US. And also, it seems like young people are kind of invested a bit more these days in sounding less like I'm from this specific place and more like I'm a cool American kid.
So are we
yeah.
on the move towards potentially just having what would be considered an American accent?
I want to say no, because I don't think that. So I'm a sociolinguist, so I look at the interaction between language and social behavior. So for me, it would be kind of impossible to imagine not finding some value in sounding a particular way. And I can sound a particular way based on a number of different social axes. So I might sound a particular way based on my gender identity or my social class or my race or ethnicity. But place and region is one of those kind of on a short list, basically, of ways that we as human beings communicate who we are through the way that we talk. And so my answer to this is just, it's going to look different. I don't think we're going to lose our regional accents. I don't think we're going to all sound exactly the same across the US. New Yorkers will still find a way to sound like New Yorkers, and Pacific Northwesterners will sound like that, even if they don't realize it. Language is always changing is another important kind of principle, and we don't always know in what direction.
Right. Well, what I'm hearing from this is, Ben, never change.
I couldn't if I want to.
Good. Don't let anybody tease you about the way you say bagel. I think it's great.
There's no correct one way. But we will
That's
just
true.
keep teasing Ben because it's a little fun. Kara Becker, professor of linguistics at Reed College, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And Ben Keenan, thanks as always for letting us tease you a little bit and for being such a good model of the Pacific Northwest accent.
Happy to. Here's some that everybody can be left on that we didn't cover. Roof. You can take roof, bag, bagel, egg. That should sustain you all for the next couple of weeks.
All right. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the Torrent's second season without our captain, Hilary Knight. After record-breaking attendance in their first year, the Torrent has wrapped their first season. And the expansion of the Professional Women's Hockey League, PWHL, is drastically shaking up the team. Here to discuss, we have Ava Wood, aka 365 Hockey Girl, content creator and newsletter writer. Welcome to the show, Ava.
Thank you for having me.
And we've got Brett Hamil, writer, performer, and cartoonist behind the weekly series Doom Loop. Brett, are you a hockey guy at all?
Not particularly, but my kid is taking classes at the Kraken complex, so I'm learning about all of it as a complete newcomer from Florida.
That's great. All right. Well, Ava, for folks who haven't been following the Torrent, let's start at the beginning. So the Torrent just had their first season. How did it go?
Yeah, I mean, attendance-wise, it was really awesome. Seattle Torrent had the highest attendance in the league, and I feel like the expansion to Seattle was a huge success. A lot of fans really fell in love with this team. That being said, the team did finish at the bottom of the standings, and they also did not secure the first overall draft pick. So even going into this offseason, things were looking a little bit tenuous. And then add on to that, the PWHL is expanding from 8 teams to 12 teams. So quite a big shakeup.
Yeah, so the PWHL is expanding, which is a good sign for the league overall. Like, people love women's hockey. We want to be watching women's hockey. I will say I am one of those fans that fell in love with the Torrent this first year. But what does that mean for the Torrent?
Yeah, so basically the way this expansion worked, teams were only allowed to protect 3 players. So with that, there was a lot of things that could have happened. And honestly, I feel like Torrent was probably one of the most unlucky teams of any of the teams. So they also have a rule where if you're a free agent, there's like a special contract they can offer you that you can't say no to, which is also what happened in the case of Hilary Knight.
Let's get into this. So Hilary Knight, who was our captain, our beloved captain, who also led the U.S. women's team to victory in the Olympics, has now been traded away. What happened with that? And you mentioned, the Torrent could protect players. Was she not one of the ones that we wanted to protect?
Yeah, so that was the first big thing that happened when Torrent announced their protection list. They protected Hannah Murphy, who's a goaltender. They protected Alex Carpenter, who's a forward. And they protected Anna Wilgren, who is a defender, which left Hilary Knight unprotected. And I think a lot of people were really hoping that Hilary Knight could come back to the Torrent. But honestly, as soon as Torrent left her unprotected, that was like a really big gamble. So yeah, Torrent did not protect her. And again, she was technically a free agent. And there was a lot of rumors that she really actually wanted to go to PWHL Detroit in the expansion. But then Las Vegas used their EFO contract on her, which according to the expansion rules, she cannot say no to. So as things currently stand right now, she has signed a 1-year contract with Las Vegas. But the plot thickens because there was also some reporting that came out that basically leaked that she wanted to go to Detroit. So Detroit might be planning to trade away a draft pick for Hilary Knight. So a lot of things in the air right now.
Fascinating. So why wouldn't we protect our captain?
Well, here's the thing. So remember, we're also an expansion team, and we also got Hilary Knight in expansion. So the thing is that, like, leaving Hilary Knight unprotected isn't technically unprecedented, considering that Boston also left her unprotected. So I'm not the GM. I don't know 100% what was going on behind the scenes there. Like, I think it would have made a lot of sense to protect Hilary Knight. A lot of people were expecting them to do that. But at the same time, we're not really expecting the PWHL to expand anymore past this 12 teams for a few years. And even if they want to keep Hilary Knight, like, I'll be honest, I do think age was a factor because she is 36 years old. So maybe they're saying, okay, you only have 3 protections. Maybe they're looking at younger players. And I think they were also looking positionally, like protect 1 forward, 1 defender, 1 goalie. And as far as protecting Alex Carpenter, I think that was a really good protection. So yeah, it kind of sucks.
Yeah, it's a big change for the team. So Brett, how does it feel to know, along with me, that if we were pro athletes, we would just be cooked? Like, that we're just like way too old to ever be worth protecting?
I mean, especially in hockey where there's just constant slamming and banging about. Yes, I am long past my professional hockey days at this point.
Do you think your son would be interested in going to see the PWHL? Like, is there a world in which you get interested in the Torrent?
Yes, it's cool to see a sort of queer-coded pro sports thing happening that is getting people really energized. Also, my kid, when he does the Learn to Skate classes, some of those are co-ed. I think there is an all-girl option, but they're also co-ed. So he's already playing hockey with girls and such. And we definitely want to go to a game. Unfortunately, hockey is one of the most expensive tickets of any professional sport, even for a brand new expansion team. So it hasn't happened yet, but it probably will.
Yeah, I mean, at the very beginning of the Torrent season, that's what really got me in the door. I was like, these tickets are so cheap compared to Kraken tickets. I will say, I think they got a little bit more expensive after the team came back from the Olympics, and they did quite well, which, I mean, sure, if this correlates with them being paid more, I'm all for it. But how are we feeling about this upcoming season, Ava? Like, what are you going to be looking for? What are the other changes that might happen in the off season that you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is this upcoming PWHL draft. This is the biggest draft to ever happen in the PWHL. And I think when you look at how the league is expanding, like, it makes sense for them to expand with this draft. Because I think what you've seen in some other women's sports, for example, the WNBA, is like there's not even enough roster spots for the number of players entering the league. So yes, it's messy right now. They're adding a lot of teams all at once. But my hope is that, hey, now we have more spots for incoming players that are going to new teams. They're presumably getting a raise for going to those expansion teams. So a lot of really good opportunities for players. And then the other really exciting thing is that they did add more West Coast teams. So we have a San Jose team and a Las Vegas team now. So I'm excited to see some of those like divisional rivalries really build next season. And like, yeah, it sucks that we lost a lot of players. But honestly, with this draft and like so many more shoes left to drop, I don't know, I'm still feeling pretty excited. And I'm sure that there will be new players that fans are able to really fall in love with.
As someone who lived through the NBA expansion into Orlando and saw a lot of games in that very first season and then saw them draft Shaquille O'Neal and such, it was very exciting to go on that ride from being bottom of the league, most losses of any team in the NBA, to starting to build up and eventually produce their own stars and develop their own rabid fans. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I will say, as a former San Jose Sharks fan who was a fan kind of during their heyday in like the mid 2010s, I am trying to like get on the train from the first stop and like watch them really rise. So I have big hopes for the Torrent.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, yeah, we've only been through one season. Like, I don't even think we know where this is even going to go. So it'll be so cool to see what this grows into in like 5-10 years.
Totally. All right, let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to run through some of the week's biggest headlines so far. This is our midweek medley, where we go through some recent headlines from this week that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet. So the first one is that the Seattle social housing developer bought its first building recently, the Elara in Belltown. You all might have heard about this. It has 150 units. It's supposed to be mixed social housing, and people can apply for these affordable housing units. And over the 2-week period that they had open applications, they got over 10,000 people who applied to live in these buildings. What does that say about how our city is feeling about social housing?
I feel like it says that there's not enough social housing yet.
Rent is too damn high. Everyone knows it. These are very desirable spots. I have friends who are in other forms of affordable housing, but it just shows that this game is social housing's to win. There are a lot of people who were invested in Prop 1A failing and kind of sticking with the status quo. And this was seen as like, oh my God, what are they doing? This is kooky. This is crazy. So there is a lot of sort of establishment interest in this failing or not succeeding at a large scale. So you just got to kind of root for them. You know, this is the first step. What's next? I'm sure they're already looking at other acquisitions or even construction of new units, but it is much like the Torrent, we are seeing this fledgling organization trying to build up, and it's already got a pretty established fandom, apparently, because 10,000 people went in on those units. It's go time. They've got to produce. They've got to show that this is a viable model. Other cities in the world have shown this, but here in Seattle, it has to. All the naysayers have to be proven wrong.
Yeah, I mean, 10,000 applications for 150 units, I think, suggests that there is huge demand, and we will see. I don't know what happens with those applications, like if those get forwarded on to the next place, if people are still interested, or if they have to reapply. But it seems like the SSHD is off to a roaring start, and I think they're going to start making offers pretty soon. So it'll be interesting to see once folks actually move in, how that all works for them.
It's important to consider that winning this lottery might be the opportunity for some select few people to actually stay in Seattle. And there are probably people who are on their way out who have given up on being able to afford rent. More power to those people, and let's do more of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of affordability, Costco just set a 50-year record for its gas sales. According to the Seattle Times, Costco gas stations are typically about 30 cents cheaper per gallon than regular gas stations. So they have been seeing record numbers of people lining up for the pumps. I don't know if you all are Costco members at all or have been trying to take advantage of that cheaper gas.
I don't have a car.
All right. So Ava's marked safe.
We got a Costco membership a while back specifically so I could buy new tires for our car because they also have really good deals on tires. We let it lapse because it's a real pain in the ass to go there, to be honest. And for these people saving 30 cents a gallon, they're sitting in lines and dealing with some of the worst parking lot drivers in the universe. But it's pretty cool. I mean, Costco just keeps winning in terms of, when you contrast them with Target jettisoning DEI at the very beginning of the Trump campaign and all these other chains just showing their true colors under fascism. It's pretty cool to have homegrown prices and is actually doing stuff that people like.
Brett, I'm kind of on the same page about Costco where I appreciate what it is and that I can get cheaper prices there. The experience of going there is just, you got to really pack your patience. I was just there over the weekend to pick up a prescription for my dog, which is for some reason like $100 cheaper at Costco than anywhere else. But man, as soon as I got in there, I was like, this is a get in and get out mission without being hit by a car in the parking lot or having to stand in too many lines. But do love a homegrown success story.
I feel like Costco is targeted towards like a specific customer, and that's what makes them so successful. And like, so I'm from Michigan. And like there's a Costco in my hometown, which is like not like a super big city, but like, yeah, it's probably the best place to go if you're going to drive to a store and get all your stuff like affordably. So yeah, good job, Costco.
Our resident Costco fan, Liam, is here in the comments of my show doc saying, you got to embrace the vibe, go slow, look at stuff, peruse the clothing, buy snacks. See, that's the problem. I feel like I end up buying like a Costco amount of snacks, and I can't be having that all in my house or else I'm just going to be eating Reese's cups for the next, 10 years or whatever.
They also change the layout of the store regularly so that it's a new labyrinth every time you walk in, so you're exposed to different products. So there's definitely some real corporate manipulation going on there. Abso-friggin-lutely, yes. So, I mean, it does assist in helping you discover new things, but I'm the type of guy where it's like, I have already mapped out exactly in my head where to get the items that I need and get me the hell out. So that can be a little annoying. So yes, you do have to embrace your inner bulk consumer. And my kid is constantly saying, can't we go back to Costco? Because he pictures just us buying like a giant thing of popsicles the size of, both your arms, and that's not how it's going to play out for him, but he does have this dream.
Changing the layout is diabolical, but I guess that's part of the game is that it's not reliable, so you have to look at everything, and you just end up spending way too much money. All right, so just as Costco shoppers are trying to save some money on gas, it turns out that our state is also going to need to tighten the belt a little bit. So last Friday, the director of Washington's Office of Financial Management wrote a memo alerting state agencies to try and find ways to make their budgets a little smaller. It cites inflation as a major factor in the state's budget shortfall. It says inflation increased 39% in the last decade. And it also says that the state's population increased by more than 1 million people, or 14.2%, which has put more strain on state services. We have it feels like, been in some kind of budget pinch for a long time here. And I guess there's no sign that inflation is going to slow either.
It's Doge Ferguson there in the governor's mansion thinking that we need to just cut. It's part of this. He's part of a long heritage of austerity Democrats who win statewide office, especially for governor. Look, Seattle is frequently listed on lists of the most wealthiest cities, the most desirable cities, the safest cities, et cetera. Washington as a whole also ends up on these lists of most beautiful states to live, et cetera. There's constantly people pouring in here. How come our tax base keeps shrinking? And how come we we all know the answer. There's no income tax here, and we need to tax the wealthy. It's just as simple as that. And Bob Ferguson is constitutionally incapable of addressing that basic fact. He would be a Republican in some places. He certainly is in Seattle. He's opposed to any sort of progressive taxation. You can't fund the programs you want. And now he's looking to compare our state departments with other states. That is completely the wrong way of thinking. It's just shocking. It's just the answer is right there in front of him, and it always has been.
So this memo did mention that the newly passed millionaires tax will be bringing in more money for the state. That doesn't go into effect until 2029. So for this coming biennium, it's not going to be bringing in much for the state. Hence, this kind of tightening of the belt.
I know when I moved here, I was really excited because I was like, no state income tax? How is that even possible? Like, yeah.
It's not possible. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting. So do we think that they would ever change that or no?
There have been runs on making a state income tax. We all know that's what's got to happen to have Washington be on a par with other great and prosperous states. But when you keep electing people like Bob Ferguson, who want to starve the programs of revenue, pretend that we are poor, this is not a state without commerce and prosperity. There's just no good reason for it. You have to vote in politicians who are going to change that. And Bob Ferguson made it very clear from his candidacy from the get-go that he would not be that dude. And he's not been that dude.
All right. And moving on to our last thing. A 2026 report from the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America ranked Seattle 3rd for grass pollen. Thanks, climate change. Are you all feeling this? Because I feel like I have been in allergy hell for like a month or two.
Mark's safe from allergies somehow.
I moved here 26 years ago from Florida as a long time, like what we called hay fever, which is just, seasonal allergies. And I would my eyes would get all puffy and I'd sneeze. I moved to Seattle and I have never thought about it again because whatever the pollens are in the air here are not the ones that set me off. So I'm doing great. Sorry, Jane.
All right. That's all for today here at CityCast Seattle. Ava Wood, if people want to learn more about your work and keep up with the Torrent, where should they go?
Yes, I'm on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, and I even have a newsletter for people who hate social media.
Love that. Love that we're just going back to the old texts of written stuff that goes into your inbox. Ava Wood, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And Brett Hamil, thanks as always for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
I'm your host, Jane Sihu, and listeners, we want to hear from you. Send us your thoughts on the Torrent second season or what words you want to hear Ben pronounce by sending an email to seattle@citycast.fm. You can also text us or leave us a voicemail at 206-880-3931. Until next time, see ya, Seattle.